two other things before we come back around, because I do want to talk about the Gileadites and this idea of, I don't know, maybe in this day and age, some people might say, who did he think he was speaking for? With the provisional constitution, of course, he had a convention largely comprised of Black expatriates who voted and said, we approve of this document. In the Declaration of Liberty, he does, as you say, he speaks as a representative. And on one hand, I like the position of saying, well, he's speaking for those who can't be spoken for. He's speaking for them. But in this day and age, I almost wonder, would there be people who would say, how did he dare to do that? And it kind of goes back to, this is what I want to hand it back to Jan, because in 1850, when the government had the Fugitive Slave Act re-energized, and the Black community in Springfield was particularly terrorized, and Brown had friends and saw it, he enacted an organization, which again, he steps in these situations, and there's paperwork. And I think this is the thing I get a kick out of Brown, is that you point that out, but he's always drawing up documents. Mm-hmm. This is something that I think he feels like he can't move legitimately without. But it does, I think, in what you're saying, Professor, is that it takes a particular direction and shape in going toward a constitution. But Jan, as you reflect on what you've heard and going back around to Springfield, 1850, United States League of Gileadites, the documents he drew up.
Yeah. Well, I'm very struck by something Robert mentioned that I think is very important, and that was a part of Brown's life, seemingly from the beginning, and that was principle, not only as a Christian but as a citizen, and this idea that he was some blood-crazed maniac is so antithetical to the record of the man's life. And when I think about the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 and the world that it unleashed, I mean, violence broke out all over the North. And there were, countless examples of violent injustice being inflicted by federal marshals on free Black people. Oh my gosh, am I talking about today? Anyway, I think he had already moved up to the Adirondacks, but he came back to Springfield to his former community of Little Haiti. And he collaborated with those local Black people to protect themselves from those federal marshals who needed absolutely nothing. They could just come in and snatch somebody and take them away, and all the judges were being paid off by the government. And so because of his principled mind and his determination that he always be seen and understood as an American, as a patriot, that he was defending American principles of freedom and equality, he wrote this document called the League of Gileadites that I guess I would say dignified their use of defensive violent means to protect the people of Springfield. And then as far as the Kansas, I just wanted to bring up John Brown's Parallels, which he wrote and which was widely published as he ultimately left Kansas in early 1859. Brown had never intended to go to Kansas. His sons had emigrated there, and he was getting these letters from his sons just saying, we're in very desperate circumstances here. The federal government was putting arms into the hands of these border ruffians, these Missourians, who were crossing the border and illegally rigging these elections with extraordinary numbers. In some cases, the county would have, 400 residents, and there were 7,000 votes for the and it was all because of these ruffians. And his sons were saying, we need guns more than we do bread. And Brown came down from the mountain and he went to Syracuse, and he went to the convention of the first convention of the Radical Abolition Party. I think it was the one and only convention of the Radical Abolition Party, which was led by James McEwen Smith and Frederick Douglass and Gerrit Smith. And I feel like starting with the Gileadites and then again with Kansas, Brown began to see himself, I think, in direct opposition to the federal government and what it was trying to enact, which was to expand slavery. And as we know, the Republican Party and later Abraham Lincoln, it was not an abolition party. It was an anti-expansionist party. And so as Brown was leaving Kansas, he and his colleagues emancipated some enslaved people in Missouri. And as he said, all hell was unleashed. And he wrote this document called The Parallels to show that when the border ruffians had snatched up, I forget how many there were at the Marais-des-Cygnes massacre. I think there was maybe 17 or something abolitionists, and just shot them in cold blood. There wasn't much fanfare. But when he emancipated these human beings from enslavement, as he says, all hell was unleashed. And so he really becomes a national figure after Kansas, because these documents and these events are national news. And Osawatomie Brown becomes kind of a household name. In 1858, there's a Broadway play called Osawatomie Brown, which he never saw. But that ideological thinking, I think, also very much built his ideas, which ultimately culminated in the Provisional Constitution. And those debates at Chatham with, Delaney and the rest of those expats those were extraordinary arguments. And there was one particular argument that was quite remarkable, because many of them objected to the fact that Brown was not a revolutionary. He wanted this movement into the South to be under the banner of American principles. And of course, these men had been brutalized by this system, so they didn't want to fight under the American flag. They didn't want any part of that. But through his convictions, he was able to convince them that his idea of American principles was the real America. And I find that quite extraordinary, given what those men in Canada had been through.